Hi, Rudy Rodriguez here. And on today's episode, we have a special guest, Jules from the Unconventional Life Show. Welcome.
Hi, welcome everyone. So good to be here.
Awesome, Jules. I'm glad you're here on the show with us today. I'm really excited for today's episode because when you were connected to me by our mutual acquaintance, Maya Rose Rogers, she spoke very highly of you right away. She was so impressed by the quick call she had with you and the unconventional event that you had coming up in Egypt. So I had to learn more. And then when I went to start to learn more, I started to learn more about you. And I was like, oh my gosh, Jules has to be a guest on our show. And here you are.
Here we are. Yeah, so good to be here.
Yeah, and for our listeners who are just now meeting Jules for the first time, Jules is a musician and the creator of Unconventional Life. It's a bucket list events company that actually is also one of the top rated podcasts for entrepreneurs that's reached millions of people in over 75 different countries and features stories about people who follow non-traditional paths. She's also a real estate investor, speaker, author, and high-level business coaching consultant. And the reason she's on the show is because she's a very experienced event leader. In fact, she was ranked #1 event for entrepreneurs by Inc. magazine. So with all that being said, Jules, I am really excited to hear from you today on how to unconventionally promote your event and how have you done it? How have you built your event business and done the amazing things you have done?
Yeah, well, thank you for this introduction. I never actually set out to get into events. Events, I think, sought me out. It all actually began with a near-death experience, a wakeboarding accident I had about 7 years ago, where went out with the guys one day, hit the water, face planted, and came out of the MRI in the hospital, out of body experience to this white figure, 6 black shadow council member conversation that was, Jules, you have more work to do at the time. Do you want to do it? And at the time, they thought my neck was broken. They thought I might have been a vegetable. And I just remember saying yes, as long as I don't come back as a vegetable. And then that next moment, I was zapped back into my body, felt this energy, forged my neck back together and shoot down the spine. And the day I woke up in 2015, that day, everything shifted. It was very much the end of life being driven by me and the start of life coming through. And I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. I was running a digital marketing agency. I had just gone through a business partner embezzling a bunch of money, was in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt from another, venture. And I get a call 3 weeks later from a woman working at the United Nations who I met at a TED conference. And she was like, you want to come be a global ambassador for education? And I'm in a neck brace, still recovering from this accident. And this voice is like, tell her you have an initiative. And flash forward 3 weeks later, I'm at the UN. I start writing for Forbes. I create the first podcast on Forbes called Unconventional Life. And that led into a visceral dream that I had where I saw 30 entrepreneurs gathering and I woke up and Bali came out of my mouth and it was the vision for the first live event. And at that moment in time, that dream shook me. I remember talking to my then boyfriend. I was like, I have this idea. I think it's about business. I think it's about life. I don't even know if I like people. I don't even know if I'm good at events. I have no idea how to get started. And this nag, and I think we all have these feelings sometimes, this knowing that there was something more, it just ate at me. And I called a girlfriend who had been in the industry for 15 years. And I was like, Lynanne, you got to help me out. 3 weeks later, we threw the first event in Bali for 30 entrepreneurs. And it was the first moment in my life, that day 5, that I felt like I finally found my form. I finally found the outlet for all these parts of my self-expression, musician, entrepreneur, all these different things to have a seat at the table. And flash forward, I had a great time. I put it out there to keep continuing. And 8-10 years later, I've done trips on 7 different continents for, hundreds and hundreds of people. And it's been a really extraordinary experience that, you never really sought out to do. And here we are doing it. So.
Well, it's inspiring. I love that you share you had no idea how you're going to do it. You didn't know how you're going to do events, find people, none of that. You just had this vision and this faith and you just committed to that. And here you are, 7-10 years later, and you've done it in a very unconventional way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, we've done these events, castle towns in Italy, islands in Madagascar. We just got back from Antarctica, and it's, always been, I always come back to what's most alive in me and where do I feel the energy and where do I feel the current? And I really do believe when we give ourselves conviction and we take a stand for the things that we feel that are important to us and we honor and pay respect to the things that really light us up, I do believe that we get that same back tenfold. And that's been really the secret of my business has been people, It's been about caring for people, taking care of people, but also recognizing that one form doesn't always have to be the same. And so the model is replicatable. However, I was very clear from the beginning, it wasn't going to always be the conference town in, Austin, Texas at this hotel annual yearly. It was, what does this group want? What do I want? What excites me here? And that allowed us to, 10 years in the making, do these destination retreats all over the world. So.
Wow. And you have one coming up to Egypt too, don't you? Just in a couple of weeks.
We're taking over a ship on the Nile River, which is going to be incredible. And yeah, the events range in size from 30 to 500 plus people. I like to say I'm a magnet for people in transitions. And so fitting, right, that it got birthed from my near-death experience transition almost. And it really gets to be a place where people get to be in the and perspective of success for themselves, not just from monetary, but how do you really live legacy, purpose, impact, and all those incredible things.
Remarkable. Thank you. And just when we were in the green room before the show, we were talking about the show topic, and you mentioned that building events you feel has been a strong suit for you guys in your approach to do it very unconventionally. You mentioned this idea of the STAR network. So I'd love to turn it over to you to share, how you've unconventionally promoted your event over the years and all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it got really clear even back, when I had that dream, and I got clear that, yeah, it's great to be a big fish of your own pond, but what is it like to really leverage other zones of geniuses into these co-collaborations? And I believe we're in an era in our world right now that co-collaboration, co-evolution, we are greater than the sum of the individual parts. And so even that very first event for me back in 2016, I called my one friend who had experience, who then said, hey, what about these 3 other people who didn't even know me, who had audiences, who had experience, who had expertise? And I just said, hey, there's not much I can offer other than an all expense paid trip to Bali. Do you want to come, share your gifts, facilitate, and in exchange, share this with your network? And those people then became people that shared the event. And we literally in 3 months, sold this thing out. And I remember my dad, Wall Street guy, is like, you're going to get people to pay you how much to fly where in what amount of time zone? But it's really true that, when you think about all the people, it's a network of conversations. And one of the ways that I've been so successful at filling these events, it's all been organic, all word of mouth. People come back to, at least, 2+ events. And it very much feels like this family home. And that is in being able to really tap these co-facilitators, or I call the STAR. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, I've got an event that I want to do, or I've used paid traffic, or I haven't been that great with it, audience pooling is really at the heart of the method. And I say, activate your STAR. Who are the 5 people, the 5 points in your life, the 5 cheerleaders that just love you? And at the time, I didn't even know what I didn't even know. I was like, I had nothing in the industry. I wasn't coming from an audience. I wasn't coming from anything, but I did have people that had been in the background, witnessing my journey, loved what I was about, dug my vibe, and they had friends who had friends that also happened to be similar network. So your first step in the STAR network, identify your 5 cheerleaders. These could be people that are in your industry. They could be people that just love you, such as how we got connected, right? It was just someone that heard about what I was doing, that shared about it with you, and she hasn't even been to one of my events yet. And so we have these people that we often don't see as explicitly. And then it's a conversation of, hey, I would love to collaborate with you. And maybe these stars are also people you want to have come to your event. Maybe they're co-facilitators. Maybe they're people you want to have present, whatever that might be. Maybe they're just joint ventures. Maybe you offer them an affiliate, but figure out what's the win-win you can create in the relationship. And sometimes it's just as, hey, I just want to support you. Get me later. Sometimes it's like, I'm happy to support you. I'd love a percentage of ticket sales. Sometimes it's like, I just want a free trip to Bali. That's great. I'm happy to support you. But discover the win-win as the step 1, activate the STAR. And I find once you get 5 people in motion about your event, the conversation or the current of transformation, the arc of transformation you're standing for, it starts to become its own independent entity. And where I see people get stuck in filling their events is they really are the only ones holding it. Meaning they're the ones, or their business is the one that's holding the energy of it. So whether they're on a good day or a bad day, people are registering or not registering, the idea lives and dies at the effect of what they can individually or as a business handle. When you move it into this next layer of the STAR network, it starts to become something independent, like a separate organism that breathes outside of you. And then that creates its own network of conversations. And then usually I find there's that next STAR network. Those 5 tell 5 more, who tell 5 more, who tell 5 more. So where I spend my energy when we do our events is not individually selling, but I go to how can I most empower people in that first 5 to feel empowered to share? How can I create a win-win where they think it's so freaking cool, like you're going to Egypt or wherever it is, that they can't wait to come back or to be a part of it, that they can then continue those conversations out there. And when I see those ripples, I watch these events, whether, like I said, they're 30 or 500, start to fill in record time. And so figure out who your first 5 are, find a win-win, empower them to take that next step, create a win-win in that opportunity, and let this be an independent conversation such that your job is only to tend to the system rather than attend to the direct registrations.
I'm over here taking notes, Jules. So this is remarkable. I'm going to recap what I heard you say. Number 1, part of your star method, select your 5 stars. 2, discover the win-win. 3, empower them. And then I think I lost you on step 4 just a little bit. What was the next step?
Then once you've got them empowered, then your job really just becomes about tending to your network. It is less of, I don't at this point spend the time having one-to-one conversations of trying to get people to register for my events. I really go one to many, and my time is just tending to my stars. What do you need? Should we jump on a Facebook Live? Do you need a sweet graphic made? Like, how can I, best empower you to be more supported? And so I'm really just the audience tender, and that allows all boats to rise and for people to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's the last piece. We're naturally wired to want to feel in community. So you want to feel a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. So if you can connect whatever that thing is for you, for me, I realized I didn't want to make money in one of 12 ways. Like I wanted to have the and reality. I wanted great love and great relationships and great money and all the things. People wanted to rally around that. So I get to be the cause of that. So whatever the thing is that lights you up, that your event stands for, that you care about, if you full-heartedly just get to embody that vision that you stand for and rally your stars to hold that with you, then that gets to be your full-time job. And you'll watch how quickly the results of registrations happen from that. Stay in your zone of genius, which is having your vision, activate those to have shared vision and see the fruits that become possible.
Oh, this is great. And as far as selecting the 5 stars, if I can just maybe dig a little deeper with you here, can you give a relevant recent example of how you went about selecting 5 stars or one of your 5 stars, and just kind of how that conversation sounded like?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got our event happening up in Egypt. We do 2 unconventional lives, every single year. We're going to the Nile River, and we just did an event in Fiji in November. And I was feeling this sense of like, I wanted some new energy, some new stars, if you will. I was feeling like the same types of people were coming to the events, and I love that, but I always try to have at least half the ratio of new energy kind of coming in as well. So one of the conversations that I had, was with my core team, those that I knew were already going to come. And I just put it out there and I said, hey, I want to expand what's here. Who has some great ideas of other people that we could tap? And oftentimes we feel like, I don't have an audience. I don't know anyone. There's no one who can support me. So even speaking into existence, I'm open for new introductions. I'm open for new relationships. Who do we already know? So if you can even just ask the question, if I know somebody who I think has a network or who might know other people, who do you know? That is the first step I often find. And that was an example of how I did it. Next thing I knew, I had like 15 introductions. I was like way overloaded of possible people that could happen. And what I did is I then just started to have a couple conversations. And for me, it's vibe first, the energy and alignment fit first. And from there, sharing what the opportunity is, what could be possible. And for my co-facilitators, it's a trip to Egypt in exchange. I hope that they at least bring 2 people at a minimum. And then after they bring their 2 people, I then have like a whole sweet perk system, whether it's like commission that they then offer to them, or if it's upgrades, they get a better suite on the yacht or credits or whatever it might be. I then have like, I gamify what I'm doing, so it feels fun to play. And everything I'm doing, I tend to gamify. And so in that particular incident, pull the audience for more members. That's been one. And then the other is, if I'm activating a star, sometimes I'll see who's sharing my stuff a lot, who seems to be commenting a lot, who seems to just be like down on all the things that I'm doing. And sometimes that's another way I'll find stars, is just have a conversation, say, hey, I noticed you like a lot of what I put out there. Like, would love to, see if I can make you an official ambassador. And that's the other approach is I'll activate ambassadors in my network of stars too. So co-facilitators, ambassadors, people who love my stuff. So it almost like you think about a music artist and they do a grassroots approach. I view it the same way where I'll have, stars, ambassadors, co-facilitators, super fans and all those things. And it just kind of sprawls from there.
Wow. So there's multiple tiers of stars. It sounds like different types of people who are supporting, promoting you along the way.
Absolutely. And one key distinction here is once I have someone that says I'm a yes, I actually have an agreement. I have a speaker or a facilitator agreement or an ambassador agreement. And why I do it, and it's simple, it's just a one-page document. But I find there's something that when you can have people commit to something, like just the act of a commitment of like, if an ambassador or a star knows, hey, if I do this or this happens, then I'll get that. There's something that finalizes it in the energy. And I tend to hold the value that if I activate 5 stars and 2 of them become shooting stars, then I've won the game. And so for me, there's no scarcity of like, must find the perfect 5 stars. In some ways now at times, like I'll even activate like 10 stars. If I'm doing a big event, sometimes it's even 15 stars. And if I just get 3 to 5 shooting stars that really take off, then, the game is won. And so it really does get to be a snowball effect that compounds.
Awesome. Very cool. So activating stars, 5 or 10 stars, just knowing that, hey, maybe not all of them become shooting stars, but that's the game and you're okay with that. And I like how you say discover the win-win as the second step. And I feel like you were kind of tipping into that a bit here with like, hey, they get these incentives if they bring a certain number of people. Anything else you can share around how you go about discovering that win-win with your stars?
Absolutely. And a lot of it, is just a conversation. And I used to think everyone was motivated. Like sometimes you listen to these marketing stuff and it's like, must be affiliate commission, must be money. And the way my events work, they're high cost events on the front end. So offering additional money for affiliates doesn't really always work with my model. So I had to then get creative, like what other things can I offer? And so how that conversation will typically sound or go will be like, hey, I'm doing this event in Italy, or I'm doing this event in Egypt come May. And I'm looking to really like expand, the tribe. Like I believe in the power of the 1 degree network, which means we're always 1 degree, away from someone amazing that we should meet, or vice versa. Someone I know is amazing from someone, that they should meet. And so I will say, hey, I would love to be able to count on you as, one of my stars or ambassadors or co-facilitators, depending on what role that I see them in. And I would love to know if you'd be interested, in having a conversation about it. So that's kind of the first step is like, start the topic, get consent. Is there any shared interest? And sometimes they'll be like, what does that mean? Or you find your own language, right? I'm using my language for it. You might find your own language for it, but get consent. Yeah, I'm into it. Or tell me more, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'll usually, share like, well, what's happening in your life right now? Like, I always like to discover, like, what do you got going on? And sometimes someone's like, I have one of our stars is like, I've got an event happening in September. Maybe we could make a great marketing video where we promote your Egypt event on the front end, and then we promote mine. And if they sign up for both, we offer $500 off. Like, what do you think about that? And I was like, brilliant idea. That was the win-win. So I had the team make a reel. We had a win-win video, and then boom, now we're off to the races in that. And so being in that ask of like, hey, what's happening in your world? What would support you? And sometimes it's simple like that. And sometimes it's like, I don't even know right now, but I'd love to be able to count on you for when I have a moment and I could come back to you later. Or someone's like, yeah, I'd love the exposure to your audience. And that's another thing is never underestimate the people you have and the currency we have. And relational currency, in my opinion, is more valuable than any monetary currency. And if you can be a good human and do good things and show up for people in ways that matter to them, people will want to show up for you in return. And that generosity pays dividends tenfold. And the more you nurture, which for me, the more I nurture my garden, my relationship garden, my audience garden, the more I don't even think about, is it a win-win or not? It just becomes this overflow. And so I tend to be a listener first and an excavator first. And then, sometimes the timing is right. And someone's like, I'd love to, but I can't right now. Catch me the next event. I got a lot going on. Okay, cool. Got it. And from there, you meet people where they're at and you just be a good human and good things happen. As simple as that might seem.
I like it. Be a good human, and also specifically like listening for what makes a difference for people, right, and meeting them where they're at. Really cool. And then the third thing you said, empower them. Anything you want to share or expand on how you go about empowering your stars?
Yeah. So everyone has their own method for how they share. And I find that really understanding how someone gets lit up and sharing about things. Like sometimes you have like the friend that always gives you the phone call when they're excited and they're like, oh my gosh, you got to come to this concert or whatever it is. Sometimes you've got the friend that just is the texter. They never call you on the phone. Sometimes you got the friend that's like forwarding you emails. They don't call or text you. So you got to figure out what natural format and form resonates for this person and set them up for success. And so I don't just like mass mail people with, here's my affiliate kit and all these things. And not that you can't have those things together, but I also really want to understand, like, how do I make this so simple for you? How do I make this such a natural extension of you and how you share with people you care about in your life that marketing is not even marketing. It just becomes a natural extension of how you share. And I really hold this distinction that when enrollment is present, registration becomes natural. So when people are jazzed, inspired, and bought in on what you're doing, the natural next step is to collect payment, to collect deposit, to do the registration act. And so often we shortcut enrollment and we only focus on registration. Here's my link. Go ahead and pay. Like you wouldn't just like walk up to some girl in the bar and be like, want to come home with me without like having an enrollment part before you would go to close. And it's the same thing is that. So when I empower my stars, I really empower them in the art of enrollment. And how do I be a champion enroller with them such that they feel they can share in a way that's natural to their extension, such that when then they go to register or close, it becomes a natural byproduct. And I really hold that distinction and that value.
That's great. Yeah, when enrollment is present, registration is the next natural step. I like that. Very cool. Awesome. I'm curious your own goals with your business. You know, what's next for you? I know you have an event in Egypt, but beyond that, like what is, your next big goal that you have as a unconventional life?
Yeah. Well, my vision for Unconventional Life has always been to bring together some of the most extraordinary minds, creators, artists, musicians, visionaries in the world and have a space where you feel like peers, a space where you get to take your mask off and you show up and the level of connection, it just is these moments of like, oh, like you too, like I feel like I've met you before. And then from those places, extraordinary business life, I've seen couples get engaged and, millions of dollars generated and all those things get to happen. And there's a methodology behind that. And I've learned over all these years that methodology, and I call it the pattern interrupt methodology. It's the byproduct of creating micro state changes over the course for Unconventional Life, 5 days, right? That whether it's in food or what people are learning or the types of conversations they're having, they create these lasting shifts. And I like to say I'm in the business of transformation at scale. That is like the through line, whether it's my music, my real estate, Unconventional Life, it's transformation at scale. And I'm in this listening of how do I amplify and make transformation at scale more mass applicable. And so for me, I've, developed an even additional company where we're actually teaching this methodology and being able to white label it behind other brands, artists. We were just chatting. We just did a private Jimmy Buffett show. We took Jimmy Buffett to Antarctica, in one of my other companies that I have a business partner in, and being able to see more of what makes people light up and shift work. That's what really lights me up. And that methodology of doing it in this co-collaborative way, like it doesn't matter if the juice comes out of your mouth or my mouth, as long as it gets said in the room, we're all winning. That I really do believe is what is here for the future. And we all can leverage our parts to really make that greater whole. And so I look forward to seeing how that methodology gets to keep rippling in these other, trips that I white label with different celebrities, organizations, and things like that. And then Unconventional Life, we got our 2 family meetups are these business accelerators that we do twice a year. So we'll have another one coming up November, December. We haven't officially announced the location yet. Stay tuned, but I know New Zealand's on the roster, Zanzibar, possibly. We've got a couple others that we're considering. So.
Wow, exciting. Thank you for sharing that. What I heard from that was transformation at scale, their partnership with a methodology that you'll be able to white label with other people. And you're testing this in your other company, which is great.
Yeah, totally. So, and have a lot of fun in the process is also a value. If you're not enjoying it, don't do it.
So Jules, for our listeners here, if they want to learn more about you, I know you prepared a gift for our listeners. Do you want to share that a little bit about that now?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the values that I hold, especially from my near-death experience, is you can either create in a linear reality, in a linear timeline, meaning you can just show up, get a lot of stuff done, and then get the results from that, show up, get good grades, get a good job, follow a linear timeline, or nonlinear reality creation in the sense that, you can take these certain actions that follow alignment, and then you can get these huge swings of results that's like the secret menu. It's the stuff that you didn't know that you didn't know that begins to become possible. And how I've had a lot of success doing that, I call going into the field or into meditative activation types of states and bringing what you discover there into form. And when you think about just the laws of energy, things move way faster when you're in those states. And then in the 3D, the physical world, we definitely have a little bit slower. And so it takes some time to catch up. And so a lot of how I teach the unconventional life, how I live, how I consult, all of that is really based in that reality. And so I've got a meditation that if you're interested in starting these events, doing it from a non-linear way, all the time I have people say, how did you just do that? Or how did that? And this is how, right? And so I've got a meditation and a workbook, which we'll put, it's the artofexperienceretreats.com/workbook, artofexperienceretreats.com/workbook. We'll put that link there for you. You can go there. It's free to download. It'll be a meditation for you to start to visualize your first event. And if you've done a lot of events, it'll connect to audience in a whole nother way. And this meditation is actually what I did with a dear friend of mine coming out of my first actual dream. And I literally, that last day of that 5-day event in Bali, like everything came to life from the details of the tablecloth and all these things in the most serendipitously unexpected plan. But if you ask top performers around the world, and I do on my podcast all the time, when you can see it and access it and experience it, even if it hasn't happened yet, we've already made contact, and then we're just allowing our timeline and the physical to catch up. And so, that's definitely something that I practice. So check out that workbook if you'd like, and that'll give you both the meditation and then a tangible, applicable way how to work with the meditation into the practical and get you off on the races. So
Awesome. That's a great gift. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes. That's the art of experience retreats.com/workbook. And I'm a big fan of meditations, visualizations. I've done some work with Joe Dispenza, and I've seen the benefit of that in my own life, and highly recommend for our listeners to download that resource, practice that next level of creation, manifestation, see it in your mind's eye, and then create it. Thank you so much for sharing this. And before we wrap up for today, any final words to share with our guests?
If you're listening to the show, just go for it. You got it. Like if you're waiting for that nudge or that permission or that voice, the moment you just decide, we forget the power of our decision power. And if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. Meaning if you don't take a choice and say, this is what I want, life gives you a bunch of other material. And so your staying power, your decision power, your ability to hear this conversation, be in this conversation, like if you're waiting for that final confirmation, like you got it. Like it's all yours for the taking, and strap in and enjoy the ride, because it gets to be a really great one when you intentionally experience design.
Awesome, Jules. Thank you for sharing those comments. And for those of you listening to this episode, be sure to share this episode with someone you feel would be a great listener to hear this message from Jules, and also share the resource that she provided here as well. Anybody you know that is wanting to create their next unconventional type of retreat, be sure to share this episode with them. So thank you again, Jules, for being with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.